Well, good morning. How are you all today? And welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I am Steve Smith. Have you really thought, or do you think that you understand the true horrors that would occur after a real SHTF situation like I write about in my books? A total TEOTWAWKI. Everything's down. There's no law enforcement, no fire, no anything, right? No lights. Everything's down. We return to an animalistic pre-electricity state of probably about the 1850s. Have you ever really thought about what would happen? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in just a minute, and I don't think that most people have any concept of it. But first, let me satisfy the addictions of the doomsumers. You know what the doomsumers are? That's a term that I coined yesterday about those who just want to consume the latest doom and gloom of the day, the horrible things, just hearing about them, not really doing anything about them, but thinking that hearing about them, it satisfies something in them. So let me satisfy that and tell you that the world is collapsing, the country is collapsing, the government is collapsing, your neighborhood is collapsing, the southern border is open. There's a war in Ukraine that they're trying to get us into. There's another war in Israel that may end up being the big Armageddon. There are asteroids. There's a collapse of the financial system. There's a collapse of everything. There is a planned food shortage. Inflation is up. Okay, are those that I didn't cover everything. There are so many more. Let me say this. I'm not necessarily saying that any of those are wrong. Okay? What I'm saying is that this unbelievable to allow oneself to be consumed with this and not take it on to the next steps of preparing for it and trying to solve it is I think it's mentally debilitating. But it's an addiction that many have. Okay, so now that we've satisfied those people, they can move on to another channel that will tell them more about how horrible things are and not really address any solutions. This was precipitated, this one, by a question that I made the previous video about, and that is, would you really want to live after SHTF? Interesting question. But you know what? Since most people don't really understand what the horrors would be, I don't think that many people answer that well with on the basis of real knowledge. By the way, let me go back and say one more thing. As far as finances, I just had somebody tell me that, and I forgot to mention. Did I tell you? Did I tell you to worry that your fiat currency isn't worth anything? I just had somebody tell me that your fiat currency isn't worth anything, so you better buy gold. But then a few sentences later, he told me that we have to use it to buy everything that we need. Do you all get the dissonance in that? Okay, it's not worth anything, but we use it to buy everything. How does that work? Let me just give you all a gentle piece of advice. Don't take financial advice from people who themselves aren't financially successful. Okay, in many cases, and I've known these people all my life, they will say that the system is collapsing, and therefore, and the financials are all phony because they themselves have not done well in it, and saying that it's collapsing is a lot easier than trying to better themselves so that they are successful within the system that we have. One of the best things that you can do right now for your preparedness is to make yourself successful in this system so you have the resources to get what you need in order to survive and then live well after a total collapse of everything. See, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And I'll tell you, I get, not that it matters to me much, but after I hear this stuff over and over and over again, it just, it gets real thin, doesn't it? Okay, let's talk about the real horrors of a a TEOTWAWKI situation, like I write about in my books. Okay, I was just reading, for those of you who are with us on Amazon, or over on Amazon, I just got a big load from them of books, new books. Over on the Patreon channel, on the Stonemont level, I just put up chapter 11 of my second book, The Revival, the audible of it, my reading of this chapter 11. I don't think I put one up since before Thanksgiving because we've been so busy, but now we're back at it. If you're wondering what it's about, this is the second book of the Stonemont series. It is the complete plan on how to prepare for, how to survive, and then how to rebuild after a total collapse of everything, and not go around being scared about, oh no, everything's collapsing, we gotta hide. Don't hide. Prepare for it and fight it. Okay. So I just put that up, and it's a particularly interesting chapter in which we start getting into cannibalism, human harvesting, slavery, things like that. So let me throw those out. Slavery and cannibalism and being held as a food source by groups who are stronger than you. Have you considered that? Most people may hear the words, and those doomsumers, they'll just hear the words and go, oh, scary, scary, I got my fix. No, you have to go deeper and think about that. When the whole world falls apart, you know who's going to be in charge? The people who can be in charge. That means the people who can bring the most force. And the people who cannot are going to be at their mercy. Now, you're either going to find yourself at maybe you're one who can bring the force, in which case, great. If you want to know how to develop the force, read my books. That's great. But if you're not, you're going to be at the mercy of whoever happens along, from the very good to the really, really bad. So bad that the average person can't even imagine that level of bad. Okay? I mean, that level of bad is called evil and enjoying it. And most people don't have the background to even enable them to imagine it. Well, that's what's going to happen. That's what you should be thinking about as you prepare. The people who said, and I saw some comments on this, and I've had a couple of comments on my own where I asked this question, said, well, I'm going to give stuff to my kids. I want them to survive. I'll be happy to just go my own way. It's not a matter of dying peacefully in many cases. Now, some may hold up in their house and just wither away and die. And in my books, I cover all that. Many will do that. Many will not have the choice to do that. Many will be taken. Many will be taken for use as slaves. Many will be taken for use as food. And if you think that just dying is the worst thing that can happen to you, well, you need to use your imagination a little bit better and understand the real horrors that occur even today in our world. And again, most people aren't aware of those things. Matter of fact, I mentioned, what was that movie that Jim Caviezel was in about the human trafficking? And I said I didn't like the movie because it didn't even approach how horrible the human trafficking, especially child trafficking, really is. So many people came up and said, oh my gosh, this just opened my eyes and all this. It was nothing. It was the Disney version. It was the Care Bear version of the reality of human trafficking. The average person has no concept of it, and the average person has no concept of what horrors occur now or would happen after a complete collapse of society. But you should. If you want to be if you want to prepare adequately and with the proper fervor and dedication, You need to understand that. Now, some of y'all have been in other countries, third world countries, in wars, and you've seen some of the depravity that happens out there. Some of you have been in law enforcement. You have seen the depravity that happens. You have seen levels of inhumanity that the average person can't fathom. But the average person is, of course, who I'm usually talking to. Most people, and I don't mean average like, I should say normal, okay? I don't mean average. You're not average. I'm sure you're all above average. But normal. Okay, those of us who lived lives that exposed us to that and then had us deal with that level of evil for years and years and years, we lived abnormal lives. To be honest, a normal life, in my opinion, is much preferable to an abnormal life, but there we have it. It did give those of us who have lived abnormal lives particular insight so that we can share it with the rest of you. And you ought to be happy you've had normal lives. So these kinds of things, what if you are taken into slavery? What if your children are taken into slavery? What if your wife or your husband is taken into slavery? There are many different kinds of slavery. What if you're taken and warehoused, like in the chapter that I just read out of the revival? You're warehoused, you're kept in cages there until it's time for you to be eaten by the people who have the control. Have you really considered that? You see, that is really what could happen if we experience something like a world killer CME that the scientists tell us is probably going to occur. It could happen even if it was just an EMP in our own country, a man-made EMP. It could happen if the grid was brought down by an enemy. That would happen. It doesn't matter about continuity of government. The government's not going to be out here making sure these things don't happen. Okay, the government's going to, if it still exists, is going to be holed up in their little mountains and their little tunnels and caves until everything shakes out, and then they'll probably be making a deal with whoever comes in. Okay, you know I'm right. No, you will be out there having to deal with horrors that you probably up to now haven't even considered, and the whole purpose of this one is consider it. Consider it. Consider the worst possible thing you can imagine, and then multiply it. Because probably most of you can't imagine the worst thing that could probably happen. The old, you can't handle the truth. Well, I'm not saying you can't handle the truth, but you probably can't imagine the truth of horrors that would come. So for those people, and if you don't, I get into it in my books. I don't get into it graphically. I get into it so that adults can understand it and children won't, because I like my books to be family friendly. I've heard from so many families say we read your books as a family activity and a prepping guide and all that. Good. I don't put in gratuitous sex and violence and horrible things like that, because an intelligent writer is able, I know a lot of words, is able to express ideas in ways that aren't too graphic, but get the point across to thinking people. So if you haven't read my books, you'll get a lot out of them. Think about it. The true horrors. And if you can imagine the true horrors, you won't be so quick to say, yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah, depends on how you're going to go. And the going can be long and horror-filled. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for your kids, your grandkids, your spouse? I don't think so. But I think a lot of people just haven't thought to that level. Let's stay on the surface. Let's stay on the surface where we can talk about your fiat currency is worthless, buy gold, or the southern border, or the war in Ukraine, or our politicians being crooked and all this. Let's just splash in the shallow end of the pool, because that deep end over there is scary, and it takes too much. It takes too much of our mental faculties to deal with. And besides, it's so much more fun to splash around in the shallow end with the inflatables, right? Rather than do what it takes to be able to survive in deep water. But that's what true preparedness is. Imagine the worst thing you can imagine. Prepare for that. And if you need help imagining these things, like I said, I help you. My books are available Amazon or through my website, stonemont.us. The links are down below. People have been learning from them since 2017. If you haven't read them, you can learn from them too. But prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. But have an idea of what you're preparing for. Okay. Have a good day with those thoughts in mind. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow, because you're going to live exactly tomorrow however you have prepared to live, God willing. Okay. Y'all have a good day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.